long before the familiar names of the Americas, before the first European sails appeared on distant horizons, or the maps of the Old World dared imagine a continent beyond the Atlantic. Native American civilizations flourished across the vast expanse of the land now called North and South America. Their origins stretch deep into prehistory, their stories preserved not only in memory and tradition, but also in the stones, bones, and footprints they left behind. The journey of these first peoples into the Americas is a tale of endurance, adaptation, and innovation, shaped by the shifting ice and seas of a world in flux. For much of the 20th century, the story of America's peopling was told through the lens of the Clovis first model. According to that narrative, humans arrived on the continent roughly 13,000 years ago, leaving behind a distinctive style of stone tool known as the Clovis point. But as with so many human stories, new discoveries have upended old certainties. Archaeologists, geneticists, and the oral traditions of native communities now reveal a far more ancient and complex picture. Recent evidence from a remote corner of New Mexico, White Sands National Park, has transformed our understanding. There, in the parched bed of an ancient lake, researchers uncovered a trail of fossilized footprints pressed into mud by children and adolescents some 21,000 to 23,000 years ago. Radiocarbon dating of seeds embedded in the same sediment has confirmed their antiquity, pushing the timeline of human presence in North America back by at least 10,000 years beyond the earliest Clovis sites. These prints, silent yet eloquent, stand as some of the strongest evidence that people thrived here during the last ice age, when glaciers still gripped much of the northern world. White Sands is only one chapter in a much older saga. To the south, in the wind-swept highlands of central Mexico, Chiquihuite Cave has yielded stone tools in layers dating back as far as 33,000 years, though this early date is controversial and not universally accepted among scholars. Farther south, at Monteverde in Chile, the remains of ancient campfires and wooden structures suggest people lived there at least 14,500 years ago and possibly much earlier. Other sites, such as Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania and the Buttermilk Creek Complex in Texas, offer further evidence that humans were exploring, adapting, and thriving across the hemisphere long before the Clovis culture emerged. How did these first Americans arrive? The dominant explanation remains migration from Northeast Asia, across a landmass known as Beringia. During the last glacial maximum between about 26,000 and 19,000 years ago, a corridor of land connected Siberia to Alaska, exposed by the lower sea levels of a colder world. Genetic studies reinforce this link, showing that the earliest Americans share ancestry with Siberian populations. Some scholars propose that these Paleo-Indians traveled not only overland, but also along the Pacific coast, perhaps by boat, following the kelp forests and rich marine life that fringed the continent's edge. Archaeological finds and DNA evidence support both inland and coastal routes, though the precise timing and sequence of these migrations remain matters of lively debate. Other, more speculative theories exist. Ideas of early crossings from Europe, or even transoceanic contact well before the Norse reached Newfoundland around 1000 Common Era. Yet, apart from limited genetic hints of Polynesian South American contact around 1200 Common Era, there is little concrete evidence to support such claims. The overwhelming weight of data points back to Beringia and to a peopling of the continent by adventurous, resourceful bands of hunter-gatherers during the waning days of the Ice Age. As these first peoples moved southward, they encountered a land of staggering environmental diversity. Towering ice sheets gave way to grasslands and forests, deserts and river valleys. Each group adapted to the world it found, shaping its tools, shelters, and ways of life to the demands of new climates and resources. The earliest Americans were skilled hunters, pursuing the great megafauna of the era: mammoths, mastodons, giant bison with stone-tipped spears, and, later, the innovative atlatl, or spear thrower. The famed Clovis points, with their fluted edges, represent a technological leap, finely crafted for hunting large game. But as the climate warmed and the great beasts vanished, native societies adapted once again, turning to a broader spectrum of plants and animals. The story of these early Americans is one of continual change and adaptation. Archaeologists describe a sequence of cultural periods, each marked by new ways of living. The pre-Paleo-Indian era before 13,500 years ago still holds many mysteries, but sites like Chiquihuite Cave and Monteverde show that people were already established in the Americas. The following Paleo-Indian period, lasting until about 8,000 years ago, was characterized by mobile bands of hunter-gatherers, expert at reading the land and its seasonal rhythms. Their knowledge of stone, bone, and wood was profound, allowing them to make tools that were both beautiful and effective. As millennia passed, populations grew and spread into every corner of the continents. The Archaic period, roughly 8,000 to 1,000 years ago, saw significant innovations. People began to experiment with plant cultivation, gradually domesticating species like squash, beans, and, most importantly, maize or corn. First domesticated in what is now Mexico, maize spread northward over generations, transforming diets and societies. With reliable food surpluses, some groups settled into permanent villages, while others remained mobile, pursuing game and wild plants with seasonal precision. Environmental adaptation was always key. In the Arctic, native peoples developed techniques for surviving the long, dark winters and hunting sea mammals through the ice. On the Great Plains, communities organized vast bison hunts and traveled with the herds. In the forests of the East, people built mounds and earthworks, some for burial, others as platforms for gatherings and rituals. Along the Pacific coast and in the deserts of the Southwest, societies harnessed rivers for irrigation, built complex villages from adobe and stone, and wove baskets and nets from reeds and grasses. By the time of European contact, the Americas were home to an astonishing array of cultures and languages. Scholars estimate that more than 50 million people lived across the two continents, with at least 10 million in what is now the United States alone. Over 2,000 distinct tribal groups have been identified, each shaped by its environment, kinship patterns, and historical experience. In Mesoamerica and the Andes, large cities rose, connected by roads and networks of trade. Early American civilizations developed agriculture, medicine, and systems of governance, supporting vibrant commerce and sophisticated social structures. Yet, even where cities did not rise, native societies exhibited remarkable ingenuity. Trade networks stretched for hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, moving obsidian, shells, copper, and other goods between distant peoples. Knowledge passed from one group to another, sometimes over generations, weaving a rich tapestry of cultural exchange. Oral traditions, passed down through storytelling, preserved histories that often align with the archaeological and genetic record, testifying to a deep sense of belonging to the land. While the archaeological record provides invaluable clues, it also leaves gaps. Many questions remain about the earliest migrations. When, exactly, the first people crossed into the Americas, how many waves of migration there were, and the precise routes they followed. Scholars acknowledge these uncertainties, and new discoveries continue to reshape our understanding. What is clear is that Native American civilizations did not simply survive in the Americas, they thrived, innovated, and transformed their world in ways as profound as any on Earth. In the centuries before European contact, these societies had adapted to virtually every environment the land offered. From the Arctic tundra to the Amazon rainforest, from the deserts of the Southwest to the woodlands of the Northeast, they developed ways of life uniquely suited to local conditions. Some practiced agriculture on a grand scale, while others relied on the abundance of wild plants and animals. The diversity of languages, religions, social organizations, and technologies was and remains extraordinary. This foundation, built over tens of thousands of years, set the stage for the chapters of history that would follow. When Europeans arrived, they encountered societies rich in knowledge, tradition, and resilience, societies rooted in the deep time of the continent itself. The story of the first peoples is not one of a static or primitive past, but of constant adaptation, innovation, and flourishing. It is a story still unfolding, as new evidence emerges and indigenous voices reclaim the narrative of America's oldest civilizations. The foundations laid by these early Americans continue to shape the land and its peoples, a testament to the enduring legacy of those who first called this place home. Before Europeans arrived on the shores of the Americas, vast and varied civilizations flourished across these continents. Their stories are not those of isolated villages or simple bands, but of complex societies, some grander than many in Europe at the time, each shaped by their environments, ingenuity, and dynamic networks of exchange and communication. These civilizations, from the rainforests of Mesoamerica to the mountains of the Andes and the broad river valleys and plains of North America, reveal a tapestry of achievement and diversity that continues to inspire awe. In the dense jungles and rolling highlands of what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, the Maya civilization reached its peak. The Maya are celebrated for their intellectual legacy, a people who charted the cosmos, calculated intricate calendars, and developed a sophisticated system of writing. Their astronomers observed the movements of the sun, moon, and Venus, using this knowledge to guide ritual events and political decisions. Mathematics flourished as well. The Maya independently developed the concept of zero, centuries before this idea took root in Europe. Their cities, Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and the vast ceremonial center of Chichen Itza rose from the jungle in towers of limestone and stucco. Each city was a marvel of urban planning, with broad plazas, stepped pyramids, and temples arranged along axes aligned to celestial events. Water management was central to their survival in sometimes unpredictable climates, as they constructed reservoirs, canals, and terraced hillsides to control rainwater. Trade bound these cities together, forming a web that extended far beyond Maya lands. Merchants carried obsidian blades, jade jewelry, cacao beans, and textiles along routes that threaded through rainforests and across rivers. This commerce linked not only Maya cities but also distant polities throughout Mesoamerica, fostering the exchange of goods and ideas. Politically, Maya society was organized into city-states, each led by a divine king and an intricate nobility. These states often competed, sometimes warring, sometimes allying, but always maintaining a deep sense of cultural connection through shared language, religious cosmology, and artistic style. To the west and north, the great city of Teotihuacan had already risen and fallen, but its legacy lingered in the cultural imagination of later peoples. By the time the Aztec Empire emerged in the Valley of Mexico, the memory of these ancient builders shaped their worldview. The Aztec, or Mexica, established their capital at Tenochtitlan on an island in Lake Texcoco, where they engineered a city of extraordinary ambition. Canals, broad causeways, and stone aqueducts crisscrossed the city, supporting a population that may have approached 200,000. The Aztec mastered Chinampas agriculture, building fertile artificial islands from mud and reeds in the shallow lake waters. These floating gardens fed the city's people and demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of environmental adaptation and sustainability. Aztec society was hierarchical and militaristic, with an emperor at its apex and a class of nobles, priests, warriors, and merchants below. Their religious life revolved around monumental temples, none more iconic than the Templo Mayor, where priests conducted rituals and ceremonies that honored a complex pantheon. Trade was central to the Aztec world as well. Bustling marketplaces thrived with goods from distant lands, including cacao, turquoise, cotton, and tropical bird feathers. The empire's influence radiated outward through conquest, tribute, and an elaborate system of roads and couriers that kept information and goods flowing between far-flung provinces. Far to the south, in the rugged spine of the Andes, the Inca built an empire that stretched for thousands of miles along the western edge of South America. The scale of the Inca achievement is staggering, given the harsh terrain and the absence of wheeled vehicles for transport. The Inca constructed a network of roads and suspension bridges, tens of thousands of miles and all that, knit together a realm from the high peaks of Peru to the valleys of Ecuador, Bolivia, and Chile. At the heart of their empire stood Cusco, a city of finely cut stone, and Machu Picchu, perched improbably among cloud-wreathed mountains, both testaments to Inca engineering and architectural prowess. Terracing transformed steep hillsides into productive farmland, while canals and aqueducts delivered water to fields and cities. The Inca practiced advanced medicine, including successful skull surgeries, and developed unique textile traditions that signified status and allegiance. Their society was highly organized, with a centralized leadership headed by the Sapa Inca, who was regarded as a living god. Below him, an intricate bureaucracy managed the distribution of resources and labor, coordinated by the use of quipu knotted cords that recorded information in lieu of a written script. The Inca's ability to mobilize people for large-scale projects such as building roads or fortifications speaks to the cohesion and administrative sophistication of their empire. While the civilizations of Mesoamerica and the Andes are often the best known, North America was home to its own sophisticated societies, many of which centered around monumental earthworks that still dot the landscape. For over 5 millennia, peoples known collectively as mound builders constructed elaborate complexes of mounds and embankments. The traditions of these cultures, Adena, Hopewell, and, most dramatically, the Mississippian, evolved and flourished in the fertile river valleys of the Midwest and Southeast. The Mississippian culture, which emerged around 800 Common Era and persisted for centuries, created some of the largest urban centers north of Mesoamerica. Cahokia, near present-day St. Louis, was the largest, boasting a population that may have rivaled or surpassed many European cities of its time. At its core stood Monk's Mound, a colossal earthwork rising over 100 feet, serving as the platform for elite residences or temples. Dozens of smaller mounds ringed the central plaza, and the city was surrounded by defensive walls. Mississippian society was hierarchical, organized into chiefdoms where leadership passed through family lines. The elite governed from mound-top residences, while commoners lived in wood and thatch homes arrayed along broad avenues. corn agriculture was the foundation of Mississippian life, sustaining dense populations and supporting both economic and military power. Mounds were not only platforms for buildings but also centers for ceremonies and ancestral veneration. Extensive trade networks radiated from Mississippian cities, carrying copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf, and exotic stones and minerals across thousands of miles. These connections fostered a shared Mississippian culture, marked by similar religious symbols, pottery styles, and mound-building techniques, even as each chiefdom remained politically independent. Elsewhere in North America, the ancestral Puebloans, sometimes called the Anasazi, built their own monumental architecture in the arid Southwest. Between the mid-800s and the early 1100s Common Era, Chaco Canyon in present-day New Mexico became the center of a remarkable cultural fluorescence. Here, massive stone buildings known as great houses rose several stories high, their rooms aligned with intricate precision to the cycles of the sun and moon. The people of Chaco engineered roads radiating outward for miles, linking outlying settlements in a regional network that may have served both economic and ceremonial functions. Trade was vital to Chaco's prosperity. Archaeological discoveries reveal that turquoise, used for jewelry and ritual, arrived at Chaco from distant mines through a web of exchange. The canyon's buildings and plazas were laid out with astronomical alignments, indicating a deep engagement with the cosmos. Chaco society appears to have been highly organized, with planned architecture and coordinated labor, though the precise nature of its political structure remains a subject of study. Following the decline of Chaco, the descendants of these peoples continued to thrive as the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo communities, maintaining traditions of masonry, pottery, and communal organization. The diversity of Native American societies extended far beyond these urban and monumental cultures. Across the Americas, hundreds of distinct groups developed their own languages, governance systems, housing styles, and ways of life. In the Northeast, for instance, the Iroquois Confederacy established a sophisticated system of government known as the Great Law of Peace as early as 1142. This confederacy brought together multiple nations in a union that emphasized checks on power, consensus, and the rights of individuals. Historians note that elements of this governance model later influenced aspects of United States democracy, including the separation of powers and the importance of debate and consensus in decision-making. Native American societies were inventive and adaptive, responding to the challenges of their particular environments with a wide array of technological solutions. In regions lacking draft animals or iron tools, farmers developed techniques such as slash and burn agriculture, intensive garden plots, and careful maintenance of fields, supporting large and stable settlements. The transition from foraging to agriculture, a process that began around 1000 before the Common Era in many areas, transformed social life and made possible the rise of more permanent and populous communities. Even without the plow or the wheel, native farmers domesticated a range of crops, including maize, beans, squash, and sunflowers, adapting their fields to the contours of river valleys, deserts, and woodlands. Innovation was not limited to farming. Native Americans invented practical tools and devices, snowshoes for traversing winter landscapes, baby bottles for nourishing infants, and syringes for medical procedures. In the Southeast, the Cherokee syllabary developed by Sequoyah centuries later would enable a flowering of literacy and education. Medicine, too, was advanced in many societies with knowledge of plant remedies, surgical techniques, and the importance of hygiene. Community life was structured in a myriad of ways. Some societies were organized as clans or extended families, others as village councils, still others as powerful chiefdoms or confederacies. The rhythms of seasons, the cycles of crops, and the movement of animals shaped daily life. Ritual and religion were woven deeply into the fabric of society, from the pyramids of the Maya to the earth lodges of the Mississippians and the kivas of the Puebloans. The mosaic of Native American civilizations before European contact was thus one of both great civilizations and profound regional diversity. From monumental cities to mobile bands, from hierarchical states to egalitarian councils, these societies demonstrate not only the heights of human achievement, but also the adaptability and resilience needed to thrive across two vast continents. Their legacies, rooted in the land and in centuries of innovation, continue to shape the world in ways both visible and subtle. Imagine the world of the Americas just before European sails darkened the horizon, a continent alive with the rhythm of countless native nations, each weaving its own traditions into the fabric of daily life. From the forests of the Northeast to the rain-soaked Amazon, the days began with the dawn, but what filled those hours and nights was as varied as the land itself. Yet, across this vastness, certain threads ran through the lives of the people, kinship, the sacred, the land, and the enduring cycles of creation. Within these communities, the idea of family extended far beyond the nuclear home. For many Native American societies, to be born was to enter a wide embrace. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins often lived close by, sometimes under the same roof or in neighboring dwellings. The entire village, in many places, helped raise children, sharing not only the practical tasks of feeding and sheltering, but also the storytelling, song, and ritual that shaped young minds. This communal approach, scholars note, fostered a sense of belonging and resilience that echoed across generations. For children, the extended family was their first society, one that shielded, taught, and celebrated them. These family ties were more than bonds of affection. They formed the backbone of social and political organization. Tribes, clans, and moieties patterned the social fabric, each with its own rules for inheritance, leadership, and belonging. In some societies, descent and property passed through the mother's line, a matrilineal system, while others traced ancestry to fathers. These structures determined not only who led, but who tended the fields, who spoke in council, and who inherited the stories of ancestors. Gender roles, too, were not fixed but varied widely from one group to another, reflecting the diversity of native cultures. In some places, women played central roles in farming, politics, or spiritual life. In others, men hunted or led ceremonies. Across the continent, balance and reciprocity were prized, each person's role seen as vital to the life of the whole. For these societies, work and art were often inseparable. The daily tasks of gathering, hunting, or farming became occasions for creativity and beauty. Baskets, pottery, and woven textiles were not just useful. They were canvases for intricate designs and symbols that carried meaning, marking clan membership, spiritual beliefs, or the memory of a great event. Some groups shaped their world subtly, using fire to clear underbrush or encourage certain plants, while others left a gentler mark, moving lightly through forests and along rivers. In New England, for example, recent research challenges the old stereotype that native peoples dramatically altered the land before Europeans arrived. However, substantial archaeological evidence indicates that Native Americans in many areas, including New England, did significantly manage and modify landscapes through practices like controlled burns and selective cultivation. In many regions, the landscape was shaped by both natural processes and widespread intentional human intervention. Yet, in the Amazon, a different story unfolded. Here, ancient societies transformed the forest through careful planting, domestication of useful species, and the creation of rich, dark earth terra preta that made the land more fertile. These legacies of indigenous stewardship have left the Amazon more resilient even today, a living testament to the wisdom of ancestral hands. The rhythm of the seasons guided life as much as any law or leader. Planting and harvest, the coming of rains, the migration of animals, all were occasions for communal effort and celebration. Ceremonies and rituals marked these turning points, weaving together the practical and the sacred. At the heart of Native American life before European contact was a spiritual worldview that saw the material and spiritual realms as inseparable. Most indigenous cultures had coherent religious systems, cosmologies that explained the origins of the world, stories of creation, and beliefs in a creator or master spirit. Rituals and ceremonies were not reserved for special days alone, but infused everyday life. From the smoke rising in a morning prayer to the great gatherings that marked the solstice or the hunt, spirituality was woven into existence. The diversity of belief was staggering. Some peoples held monotheistic views, worshiping a single creator. Others embraced an animistic understanding, seeing every rock, tree, river, and animal as alive with spiritual energy. Still others practiced forms of shamanism, with certain individuals, often called medicine people, serving as intermediaries between the human and the spirit world. Oral tradition was the vessel for these beliefs. Myths, stories, and songs were passed from elders to children, a living record carrying the wisdom of countless generations. In times of crisis or change, revitalization movements sometimes swept through communities, calling people back to ancestral practices and adapting beliefs for new circumstances. This spiritual resilience would become even more important in the centuries after contact, as Native peoples faced the pressures of colonization and upheaval. Nature, for Native Americans, was not a resource to be conquered, but a community to which they belonged. All things in creation, it was believed, possessed spiritual energy. The wind, the water, the stones beneath one's feet. Each was regarded with respect and, often, with awe. This sense of interconnectedness shaped not only spiritual life, but also the practical relationship to the environment. The land was not owned in the European sense, but cared for, with the understanding that future generations depended on the health of the world today. Such philosophies have left a deep imprint. In recent years, as the planet faces environmental crisis, indigenous tribes have drawn on traditional ecological knowledge to address modern challenges, adapting ancient practices for a changing climate, and reminding the wider world that sustainability is not a new invention, but a legacy of the first peoples. The cosmologies of the Americas were as varied and profound as any in human history. Among the Maya, for example, the sense of fate and moral order was strong. The universe was seen as a layered reality, with priests serving as mediators between the human realm and powerful cosmic forces. Rituals of atonement, offerings, and divination sought to maintain harmony in a world where sin and predestination could shape the destiny of individuals and cities alike. Such beliefs influenced every aspect of life, from the choice of leaders to the timing of planting and war. But cosmology was not the sole domain of the elite. In villages and camps across the continent, ordinary people engaged with the sacred through dreams, personal rituals, and communal ceremonies. Stories of creation and the afterlife offered comfort and purpose, teaching that the soul was immortal and that death was but a passage, sometimes to a land of ancestors, sometimes to a cycle of rebirth. In the telling of these stories, in the dance and the drumbeat, the boundaries between past and present, the living and the dead, grew thin. Art and expression flourished in this world. The patterns carved into bone or painted on skin were not mere decoration but a language, communicating identity, status, and belief. Ceremonial regalia, musical instruments, and the architecture of sacred spaces all spoke to a people in dialogue with their gods and their world. Even in the briefest lull of daily work, hands might shape clay or weave reeds, creating beauty that would endure long after the maker's name was forgotten. The legacy of these civilizations is not confined to archaeological sites or museum cases. It lives on in the landscape, in the resilience of descendants, and in the ideas that have shaped the Americas to this day. Scholars now recognize indigenous peoples as active agents of innovation, stability, and governance. Their systems of kinship, consensus, and stewardship persist, sometimes quietly, sometimes in open resistance to disruption. Despite centuries of colonization, disease, and dislocation, native traditions have endured, adapting and revitalizing in the face of change. The idea that Native Americans were mere caretakers of a pristine wilderness has faded in the light of new research. In some places, their touch was light, living in balance with seasonal abundance, moving in concert with the land. In others, as with the dark earth of the Amazon, their legacy is written into the very soil. Across the continent, the gifts of these civilizations remain, crops like maize and beans, models of governance based on consensus and kinship, and a profound sense of humanity's place in the web of life. Today, Native voices continue to shape the story of the Americas. Children growing up in extended families, surrounded by tradition and care, draw strength from the same networks that sustained their ancestors. Ceremonies persist, sometimes in private, sometimes in public celebration. And as the world grapples with questions of climate and community, the teachings of interconnectedness and respect for all beings offer a path forward. In the end, the daily life of Native American civilizations before European contact was not simply a matter of survival, but of meaning, of belonging to a community and a cosmos, of honoring ancestors and caring for descendants yet unborn. Their story is not only one of what was lost, but of what endures, a legacy written in the land, the heart, and the ongoing dream of a world in balance.